Well, thank you for coming. My name is Jeff Barrette, and with me here is Jeff Moulds. We're going to be talking to you about Python map automation in ArcGIS Pro. I work out of Olympia, Washington, but I'm with software development, and Jeff is out of Redlands, but we work on similar teams. We both work on arcpy.mapping in ArcMap. We work on arcpy.MP in Pro. We work on layout. We work on the layout SDK. We do everything together. And in fact, there are some people in Redlands, California that think that there's just one Jeff. They have no idea there's actually two of us that get a lot of this stuff done. So we're going to tag team today like we do with everything else. And so let's get going. So what we hope to talk about today is just to kind of cover some bases and make you available to some resources that will help you get going with either arcpy.mapping or arcpy.mp. And then Jeff's going to talk about migrating map documents and other documents into Pro. He's also going to talk specifically about migrating data sources in anything that you migrate into Pro. And as we moved a lot of the arcpy mapping capabilities into ArcGIS Pro, we've made a lot of enhancements and we've proved upon how things worked. So things are going to be easier for you, perhaps more intuitive. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what some of those changes are moving to ArcGIS Pro. And then I'm really excited to finish it off telling you about what we've done with exposing Symbology to the arcpy.mp API. It was something that a lot of you requested to be able to do in arcpy mapping, and we've always kind of drawn that line in the sand in terms of, you know, what's an authoring thing, something you do in the UI and you save to an MXD versus something that you automate. So we moved that line in the sand in Pro and we've exposed Symbology, and I'm excited to show you that. So what Jeff and I do and a lot of other presenters do is we create these shortened URLs. So what I'm showing you here right now is a really great shortened URL, esriurl.com, 8899. Just have to remember 8899 and that prefix. And that'll bring you to an ArcGIS Online web page that allows you to download a lot of samples that we make available, both in arcpy mapping for ArcMap or arcpy.mp for Pro. You know, I, like most of you, kind of beg and borrow from other people and tweak things and always start from some other template. And that's what we're trying to do. My personal goal is to move a lot of these samples into GitHub so that you have just another repository to be getting this stuff from. But you know, here's just 3 of our most popular samples that get downloaded. One that allows us to create dynamic tables in a map series. So as you go from page to page, you can see tabular data updating, and it's all simulated using graphics and text elements. Another one is a layout manager, where you can actually, within one layout, actually manage many different numbers of inset maps as you go from page to page, and all of that information is managed in a database, and you can control what gets pulled in and out of a page. Really nice code to look at. And the last sample there, and there are more, a really highly requested item is to be able to create index pages, like street map pages, to go along with your maps. And so that uses a third-party package, site package called Report Lab, and it complements our API very nicely. Another thing I just want to briefly mention, and again, this is another web page. So if we go to esriurl.com 9785, it brings us to this page. And let me just cover a couple of the important points. As you consider migrating arcpy mapping to arcpy.mp in Pro, it's all highlighted here. Obviously, we're working with Python 3, a 64-bit install of Python. One of the biggest changes, and a lot of things that happened when you migrate from ArcMap into Pro, is a lot of your geoprocessing capabilities are just going to work. You know, all those buffers, clips, all those analysis tools, all those scripts that you've written to work with GP just works. But that's not the case with arcpy mapping, because arcpy mapping was very tied to LYR files and MXD files, and all that has changed in Pro, right? We don't have, well, we support LYR files, but we also support LYRX files. We support project files and not MXDs. We can have multiple layouts in a project, not just a single layout. And you were always forced to have a single layout in an MXD. So for those reasons, we decided to give it a different kind of module name, and it's just MP. So if I talk about ArcPy mapping, I'm talking about ArcMap and Python map automation. If I talk about ArcPy MP, I'm talking specifically about Pro. And it makes it a lot easier for us to separate those two different sets of scripts. Because when you move to ArcGIS Pro, if you migrate any of those scripts over, you're going to have to modify your scripts. You have to. It's just, you know, arcpy.mapping.map document does not exist. Some of the things is we moved many of the list functions. So arcpy.mapping.list data frames, list layers, list, you know, elements. It just went on and on. What we did is we took a lot of those list functions and we moved them directly onto the objects themselves. So it was a lot easier to kind of, it's more intuitive, I think, in Pro to kind of figure those things out. And here's a very simple object model diagram. To get into ArcPy MP, you either start with a layer file or a project. And if you want to get to a list of maps, then off of the project, you get to a list of maps. But then from that map, you can get to bookmarks, tables, and layers, rather than doing it all at the project level. Just very straightforward, subtle changes. A lot of these types of modifications you'll make are just search and replaces. It's not that difficult. The logic is all very, very, very similar. Our export functions have moved. Before, you used to be able to export a data frame or export a layout all from the root ArcPy mapping export to PDF. But you use different parameters depending upon whether or not you're exporting a layout or a data frame. So what we've done is we've just put different export functions on the two different classes. Makes it a lot easier. So anyway, this is a great topic to go through. And of course, the samples are going to help you. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let Jeff talk about migrating map documents and data sources, and I'll come back and talk about Symbology.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. As Jeff already said, my name is Jeff Moulds. I work in the Redlands office. I work on the layout team and the ArcPy mapping team. And what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to talk about importing 10x documents into ArcGIS Pro, and then I'm going to talk about updating data sources. So you've just gotten your hands on ArcGIS Pro, and maybe you have a ton of map documents and globe documents and scene documents that you want to use in ArcGIS Pro. And maybe you have so many that you want to script this workflow. And we have the import document function to do that. And how this function works is that it'll take a path to a MXD or a globe document or a scene document and then import it into a ArcGIS Pro project. So the diagram and the code on this slide here is demonstrating a workflow where you have a whole bunch of MXDs, and for each MXD, you want to import it into its own ArcGIS Pro project. So let's look at this code here. So first off, I'll just use core Python to loop through all the MXDs in a folder. And then for each MXD, I'm going to reference a template project, and then I'm going to import the MXD into that template project and then save it out to its own file name. We also have, off of the import document function, this Boolean parameter called include layout. And this is useful when you're importing multiple MXDs into a single ArcGIS Pro project. So for example, if you're consolidating like 50 map documents into a single ArcGIS Pro project, you may not want 50 layouts clogging up your project. So keep in mind that in MXD, it always has a layout, but a lot of people, they just work in data frame mode and they don't even look at the layout. So that's useful for this type of workflow. So in the diagram and the code here, I'm consolidating a bunch of different types of 10x documents and consolidating them into a single ArcGIS Pro project. So let's actually run this in Pro. So I have a blank ArcGIS Pro project right here. There's nothing in it. And I'm just going to run some stuff in the Python window here. So I'm going to load in that same script from the slide. That's just going to import a bunch of stuff in here. And while that's running, I'll tell you what it's doing. So the first line is just referencing the currently open project. Then I'm importing an MXD and I'm including the layout. The next MXD I'm importing, I'm saying to not include the layout, so I'm setting that to false. And then I also import some globe and scene documents. And that script finished running, and let's look at what it did. So I'll expand the maps node in the project window here, and you can see that it brought in these data frames. And then if I expand the layouts node, you can see it just brought in one layout as I specified in my script here. Okay, so that's importing documents into Pro. I'm going to switch gears a little bit now and talk about updating data sources in Pro. And updating data sources will also kind of tie into the whole migrating to Pro story. And updating data sources was always something you could do in ArcMap through Python. And I think we've improved on it a little bit in Pro. And one of the classic problems this workflow solves, you could kind of see in the diagram at the top left here, where I have a whole bunch of projects, and for whatever reason, I might have 10 or hundreds or thousands of projects even, but for whatever reason, the data is gone, or it's moved, or it's changed. For example, I may have converted all my personal geodatabase data to file geodatabase, or maybe I put all my data into enterprise geodatabase, or maybe the folder structures of my projects changed, or what happened to me when I was working in Techsport is that my enterprise server actually literally caught fire, and it was even behind a firewall. But you may need to script like all these projects to point to a new server, for example. Like if your enterprise geodatabase server, you get a new one with a new name or something like that. And so we have this function now in Pro called update connection properties, and it works off of a project, a map, a layer, a table, or a layer file. And you can kind of think of it as like a find and replace for data sources. So if you look at the sample at the bottom here, I'm doing a find on this path, and that's a file geodatabase, and then I'm going to replace it with this path, which is an enterprise geodatabase. And we also have this auto update joins and relates Boolean parameter. And what that does is that it will automatically update the joins and relates on your layers if the data is in the new workspace. So let's look at a couple examples. So the first example here, I'm referencing a project, and then I'm just replacing a folder. And I'm using like just the folder name. I could have put the full path to the folder here, and it's just doing a find and replace on that folder name for all my layers data sources in that project. The second example here is I'm updating my data sources from a personal geodatabase to a file geodatabase. A couple things to note with this little snippet is that I'm doing this instead of on the project, I'm doing it at the map level. And this ties into the migration story a little bit because Pro doesn't support personal geodatabases, as you probably heard already. And that has something to do with the 32-bit Microsoft Access format being incompatible with 64-bit environments. So if you're using personal geodatabase, you'll have to convert that to something else. For example, you could just copy all the data into a file geodatabase. And the last example is just showing a similar workflow, but it's working on a layer file instead. Now in Pro, the new layer file format is LYRX. And what's different with layer files in Pro is that you could put as many layers into a layer file as you want. So being able to manage those data sources, similar to how you manage data sources in a project, is useful as well. So let's do a little demo here. So I'm going to go back to ArcGIS Pro. And I'm going back to the same project where I previously imported a bunch of stuff into it. And I'm going to look at this data frame here, or rather this map called layers. And uh-oh, I got a problem here. My map is blank. I got so basically the data is broken. I got the dreaded red exclamation mark here. So let's look into the layer properties of this layer to figure out why it's broken. So I'll go to the source tab, and you can see that's personal geodatabase. And like I said, personal geodatabase isn't supported, so I need to fix that. And then if I go into the joins tab on the layer, you can see that I have a join to a table in that same personal geodatabase. So I need to fix that as well. Now, if I wanted to fix this in the UI, it'd be really easy. I would just have to fix it for one, and it would automatically fix it for all the broken layers. But if I had a whole bunch of projects that had this problem, I'd want to script this, obviously. And this is how you would do it. So I'm going to load a script up here. And I'll execute that. And while that's running, what I'm doing is from the project, I'm calling update connection properties. I'm searching for this personal geodatabase. I'm replacing it with this file geodatabase. And this file geodatabase I already created myself. And it has all the same layers as the personal geodatabase. And then I've also set auto update joins and relates equal to true. And you can see the script ran and it fixed the data sources because it's drawing in the map now. And if I look at my layer properties, it's now accessing a file geodatabase. And if I look at the join properties, you can see that it fixed the join as well. Okay, let's talk about a bit more of an advanced workflow. Something new at Pro is that for Python developers, we expose the entire layer data source object model as a Python dictionary. And so you could use this if you needed more fine-grained control of what's available in that update connection properties function that I just showed you. And it's useful when dealing with workflows where you need to change joins and relates properties or the connection properties of an enterprise geodatabase. So how do you use this? Well, first off, you just reference a layer in the map. And I'm just going to show you the dictionary first. And so you reference a layer, then you reference its connection properties. And you'll notice here that I'm using the pprint module. And pprint is just a way to display the dictionary in an easy to read format. And this is what a simple geodatabase layer connection properties dictionary looks like. So if you wanted to, you could write a script that dug into this dictionary and changed any of these properties. Now, like I said, this is more useful for workflows where you have joins and relates. And this dictionary is a layer that has a couple of relates on it. And don't worry about reading everything on the slide or understanding everything in this dictionary. I just want to show you that there's a lot of properties that as a developer you're able to dig into these dictionaries and change anything you want. So let's look at the dictionary a little bit. So first off, this part of the dictionary is the layers database. This is a list of all the relates that are on the layer. So there's a couple relates on here, and they're in a list. The first one is right here. So this is the relate definition. So for example, as a developer, you'd be able to write a script that would go in and change joins and relates properties without actually having to drop the join and relate and recreate it. And that can be pretty powerful. Okay, so let's do a demo with this. So first off, let's just look at a connection properties dictionary. So like I said, this layer, the Mexico layer, has a join on it. So let's just look at the dictionary. So first off, I import the pprint module. Then I reference the layer. Then I get its connection properties. And then I print them. And so this is what the dictionary looks like for a layer that has a join on it. So how would you update this? If you, let's say this is our imaginary workflow. Let's say your boss says, okay, out of all the many projects that we use and that use this Mexico layer and this join table, the foreign key that join is based on has changed to a new field. So can you go ahead and update all those projects, please? Now, in the past, that would have been extremely difficult to do with Python. I don't even think you'd be able to do it with Python. You might be able to do it with ArcObjects, or even if you had to do it by hand, it would be a very time-consuming process of looking at all your layers, finding the ones that use that foreign key, dropping the join and recreating it. So this is the piece of the dictionary that I want to change. That's the foreign key, and that's the field name. And so I want to write a script that's going to dig into there and change that. And this is how you would do it. So this is just using core Python dictionaries to access that key and giving it a new field name. And then to commit it, I'm doing this off of the layer object. I'm calling update connection properties, and I'm passing in the new dictionary. Now another way you could do this might be a little bit more powerful, is off of the project, I could call update connection properties. And so this will fix everything in the whole entire project. And what I'm doing is I'm going to do a find and replace on that dictionary key value pair. So I'm going to search for the old dictionary key value pair, which is here. And again, that references this part. And then I'm going to do a replace on it. So I'm going to replace it with this dictionary key value pair. So I'm essentially doing a find and replace on partial dictionary key value pairs, which is kind of interesting. So I'll run that, and we'll see what it did. I'll go back to my Mexico layer, go to the joins tab, and you can see it's got the new foreign key now. Okay, so that was a little bit of an obscure workflow, but it shows you the power of being able to dig into those dictionaries and be able to change any of those properties that you want. So in this last example, I'm going to update a project with a new enterprise geodatabase instance and server. So this is the kind of classic workflow of you get a new database server with a new name. Everything else is the same. It's the same database, same feature classes, same operating system, authenticated users, and you don't want to create a whole ton of new connection files for all your users. You just want to do one thing, and that's drill into each of those projects and change the server name. So first off, let's just look at the connection properties dictionary for a enterprise geodatabase layer. So again, I get the layers connection properties, and then I display them. I display it right here. Now, if you look at the highlighted part, this is the connection properties for the enterprise geodatabase server. So this will be the same for all the layers that reference that server. And you could see in here my old server name is Dunbar, and I have a new server. My new server is named Shakespeare. So I want to dig into all these layers and change Dunbar to Shakespeare. And this is how you would do it. So first off, I would make a dictionary that defines the connection properties that I'm going to search for. So this is the old server name. So this is Dunbar. And then I defined a new connection properties dictionary that has the new server name, and that's Shakespeare. And then finally, I do a find and replace on the project, updating just those relevant pieces of the connection properties. And so that will update all the applicable layers to the new database server, and without having to create new database connection files, and without needing to know all my users' usernames and all their passwords. So that could be potentially pretty useful. And back to you, Jeff, for Symbology.
So I just want to remind you that everything that Jeff spoke about, again, is in the ArcPy.MP help in Pro. And we pride ourselves on our documentation and the number of samples that we make available. So if you were to just scroll through this one topic called updating and fixing data sources, we bring you through all of the different parameters, but then all of the different workflows for going from a variety of different types of databases and scenarios to other scenarios, joins or changing versions. And so anyway, just please check out updating and fixing data sources, and again, just copy and paste, and stocks close lower. How about that? Sorry about that. So moving right along here, I want to talk a little bit about Symbology. Oh, I needed to move down here. So Symbology is something that we're able to do partially with ArcPy mapping, in the sense that you could automate changing your renderers. So you could go from a graduated color, or you could connect to something that's rendered with graduated colors, and you could get into the individual class breaks and change the descriptions and modify the number of classes. And we allowed you to automate that, but we didn't allow you to drill down into the individual classes and get to the individual symbols and modify their color models or their individual color definitions. So before in ArcPy mapping, you couldn't change the color red to blue. And some people wanted to change the color red from blue, and we would kind of argue, well, there's a way of doing that. You can just define a selection symbol and do a query, and you can automatically change something from red to blue if you set your selection symbol to be blue if it was previously red. You could do little tricks like that. But the more we spoke to you, the more you were giving us real well-defined reasons for wanting to get into the Symbology model and modify that. So as we migrated things into Pro, we made lots of improvements. We've expanded the API to give you some of those capabilities. And so at ArcGIS Pro 1.4, we've exposed a good portion of Symbology. So here's a very simple object model that I've put together, and I will be putting in this to help, but it's not in the 1.4 help yet. But anyway, we connect to a layer. We all know how to find a layer in arcpy.mapping, and from that layer, we can get to its symbology using the .symbology property. And once we have the symbology that's returned, there are many different renderer types. Okay? And so we have a simple renderer. And this is just an abbreviated class name. It's actually called simple renderer. And so that's single symbol in the UI. That's what you know of single symbol. But once we get to that simple renderer, we can get to the symbol that makes up that red or blue. And we can get to a variety of properties, like the outline color or the main color. And we can also navigate, once we have a symbol, we can also search the style galleries to apply existing styles to our current symbol. So that's one renderer. We also support graduated color renderer. So again, we can get to the individual class breaks, and for each class break, which has an item and a description, it also has a symbol, and we can do the same sort of thing. We can also work with graduated symbols renderer. It has a few more properties available to it because you can modify its background symbol, and you can also modify its template symbol, so you can change everything at once if you want to, just like you can do in the UI. And we've modeled a lot of these names, property names, similar to how they work in the .NET SDK. So it's very, very similar. It'd be natural for you to jump. And then finally, we also support unique value. So with unique value, those items can be organized into groups. You have the individual groups, and then items within the group, and each item has a symbol. And then finally, with 3 of the renderers, we can also customize and modify a color ramp. So this is what we support at 1.4. And what we're working on for 2.0 is just extending the number of color models. And we're going to be focusing on raster renderers next. So we want to get classified and stretched and unique value and make some of those available. So right now what we have in 1.4 are vector renderers. So let me show a demonstration here. Oops. So what I have here is a very simple set of layers. I have state polygons and capital cities. And if we look at the capital cities renderer, you can see that it's using single symbol, or the simple renderer. What I want to do is just load some basic code in here. And nothing new here, right? So we're going to the MP library, we're grabbing the ArcGIS project, we're grabbing the current project, we're getting the first map, and we're finding the first layer that's called capital cities. But again, once we get to that layer, we're grabbing its symbology. And once we have that symbol variable, we can start doing things like, hey, do I want to get the renderer, or do I want to update the renderer? Well, in this case, I just want to get the renderer for now. And once I have the renderer, then of course I can set things like symbol, label, description. I want to look at the symbol. And once I have the symbol, well then good, I can do things depending on the type of symbol I'm working with, because this happens to be a point symbol, right? It could be an area or a line symbol, and there'll be different sets of properties available to you. But for this point symbol, I can change the angle, the color, the name, the outline color, size, simple things like that. And of course, I can use a couple of different methods here that allow me to work with the style gallery to work with those symbols. So it's very straightforward, very easy as you navigate from one object to the next. So I'm just going to backspace here. And I'm going to just load some code. So what I'm doing is I'm taking that symbology actually, not the symbol, but the symbology, and I'm updating its renderer. And going from simple symbol, I want to modify it to the unique value renderer. Okay. And then when I do that, I want to set its fields property to use the field called capital. And then, of course, I'm going to update the layer with that symbol. And if we look over here now, you can see in the symbology pane that we've updated it to unique values. We've updated the fields to capital, and it picked some default color ramp or color scheme. And you're not seeing a lot of contrast down here. You're not seeing DC kind of pop from the other state capitals, and that's also true in the items down here. So obviously we can apply different color ramps. So I'm going to use this one down here. It's nice contrasty colors. It's called set1 3 classes. So let me come over here and I'll just do some typing, and I'll type sim.renderer. I'll type color ramp, and I'll say, hey, that's equal to arcpy.mapping, which is a function we have that allows us to search for color ramps by name. So I'm going to type set1 3 classes, and I'll hit enter. And of course nothing happened, because now I have to take my layer, take its symbology property, and set it equal to that symbol variable that I've just kind of updated. And I hit enter, and lo and behold, we're seeing some of those changes. Not too exciting, but very practical and very easy. And that's what we really try and do, is make it very intuitive and easy. With just a few lines of code, you can do some important things. So now I want to modify it even more. I don't like those simple little circles, and I want to change the symbology altogether. So let me just load another set of code here. Aren't you glad it doesn't say like script 29, right? I don't have that many more to go. So anyway, going to the top here, I'm doing two things. So I have two groups of code. They're both identical. They're just slightly different by one character. But first I'm going to work with my national symbol, okay, my Washington, D.C. symbol. So we go to the symbol, we go to the renderer, and then within a unique value renderer, we have groups, right? So if we look down here in the pane, we're just seeing one group. If I were to right-click and say move value to group, you can create multiple groups inside of the unique value renderer, right? So I'm just going to escape out of that. So I only have one group, and these are all zero-based indices, so I'm grabbing the first and only group, and then I'm grabbing the first item in that group, which happens to be our national capital. And I'm grabbing its symbol, and now that I have its symbol, I'm going to apply another symbol from the point gallery, and I'm just going to use *1. But then I'm going to override those style properties, and I'm going to then take the color, and very similar to how Jeff talked about using dictionaries to modify connection properties and all the permutations, we do the same thing with symbology now. So basically with a symbol, we have a key value, and this happens to be our color model. So we support multiple color models. I can change it from RGB to HSV or CMYK, and there are 6 color models that we support, the same 6 color models we support in the user interface. 2 of them are read-only. Lab and Grayscale currently are read-only. But anyway, here I'm going to go in and I'm going to use the RGB color model, and I'm going to set its properties, its RGB values, to be red, essentially. And then this last value is opacity or alpha. It's the opposite of transparency. So in the UI, you see transparency. So 100% opacity is solid fill, right? And then I'm going to do the same thing all over again for my state symbols, except this time I'm going to get item 1 instead of item 0. And then again, I'm just simply going to update my layer symbology, and voila. Okay, just with a few lines of code, we've gone in and we've used existing styles and we've applied them to our layer. Now finally, what I want to do is I want to take my state polygons and I want to modify them to introduce another renderer type, and I also want to introduce some transparency. So here, again, I'm just finding another layer, this time called state polygons. Again, I'm grabbing its symbol. I'm updating its renderer to be graduated colors. I'm going to use the classification field, shape area, set the number of breaks, right? So the number of classes I have. And then I'm going to iterate through each one of those breaks. So in this case, I'm going to iterate 6 times. And I'm going to grab the color of each class break item, right? Whatever it is, I'm going to grab it. And I'm not going to change its color. All I'm going to do is, in this case, using its color model HSV, I'm going to grab the last property, right? Remember with RGB, I had the 4th property there. CMYK, you're going to have a 5th property, so you don't necessarily know. I want to grab the last property, and I'm going to change the opacity value or the alpha value to 50. This is the only time that opacity equals transparency. 50% transparent. Okay, and then I'm going to set that color, and then I'm going to apply it to the renderer and to the Symbology, and we've done it. Okay. So you guys have been asking for this. Raster colorizers are coming at 2.0, and beyond. We'll be introducing more. But that's all that I wanted to show you today. Let me go back to PowerPoint here. So some other things that we're working on is, you may have heard during the plenary that the year 2017 is kind of the year of equivalency. We're trying to get a lot of that ArcMap capability into ArcGIS Pro. Jeff and I have a lot of work to do to kind of continue bringing stuff that you could do in ArcMap and bringing that into Pro. So, for example, raster colorizers aren't there yet. Time isn't there yet. That's something we need to work on. We just don't have enough of it. That was a bad joke. Okay, thank you. What else? Data-driven pages and all of that capability. You had a data-driven page object in ArcPy.mapping, and in Pro we call it map series. We don't have that ability to connect to the map series object, but that really doesn't matter because really all map series is a bunch of extents, and we can control all that with Python anyway. But anyway, those are just a few more things that we need to bring into Pro to be more ArcMap equivalent. But I think you're going to find migrating into Pro, and if you've learned this inside of ArcMap, it's going to kind of just come very naturally inside of Pro, and all the language is very similar. We just may have rearranged the objects a little bit. But also today, if you're interested in other ArcPy mapping, ArcPy MP related things, there's at 5:30 to 6:30, there's enabling high quality printing or web-based printing using ArcPy mapping. That happens today. And then lastly, please take our survey. These surveys help us with our quality. They help us with room size. And we want to hear your feedback. And we also want to hear your feedback in terms of, you can either ask the question now or come up to us later. We want to find out if you're using it, if there's any roadblocks you run into. We constantly collect those requirements, and we're trying to make it a better product constantly for you. So thank you for coming, and we'll take questions. Any questions?
The second URL that you showed, what was that again?
Oh, sure. The second URL I showed, the question was, I forget, 9785 or something like that. Yes, 9785. Another question here?
Yeah, really psyched about the Symbology editing. Does that work for ArcGIS Online layers, or is it only for desktop?
The question is, he's very excited about modifying Symbology. Does it work for ArcGIS online layers? If they are using any one of those renderers, then yes. Okay, but we're just limited to those renderers.
Just confirm that all that stuff will run outside of the ArcGIS Pro.
So are you talking about Symbology or everything we talked about today? So the question was, everything that we showed today, will it run outside of the application? And the answer is yes. So, I obviously, for demonstration purposes, I connect to the current project and I do everything in the Python window or scripts tool. But you want to be able to run these as automated scripts without the application being open at all. The one issue with that, though, is having data sources that have web services, right? If you need the application open, if you have some sort of password-protected web service, correct?
I don't know if that'd be relevant to this stuff, but that would be if you're sharing to a hosted service, then you have that problem. But basically, we just do it all in the app just because it's easier to see in this environment. You could actually see the results of the scripts. But yeah, most people are going to be running this stuff out of the app.
And it's designed to work that way. We're all about automating. Over here.
You mentioned changing the server name in a project or an MXD project. Is that, how do you do it for when you've got 500 people using a server? This is just for one machine, right?
This would be for all the, okay, so the question is, how would you deal with changing the server if a whole bunch of people are using that server? And this is just going to, imagine writing a script that will go through all the MXDs that your organization uses, and if your organization is using server A, but you guys got a new server called server B, you could navigate through all those projects and point them all to the new server.
On multiple machines throughout the network?
Okay, that would, if you wanted to, yes, you could do that. If you wrote a script that would go in all the machines on that your company has, that would get pretty sophisticated, but technically you could do it.
But your point is valid. Mary and John have their own local machines. They have their own local set of APRXs, and either they run the scripts from some shared library, they run on their machine, or you would have to do some sort of job that goes out and updates their project folders.
Another question, the switching from a personal geodatabase to file, did you write something that would create those files into the database?
So the question is, when migrating from personal geodatabase to file geodatabase, could you write a script that would convert all your personal geodatabases to file geodatabase? And yes, you could do that as well. There's a GP tool that'll copy the data to the new geodatabase.
So that'd be completely outside of our library, right? That has nothing to do with map automation, but you would use core ArcPy GP functions to create feature class, load, copy data, whatever the function you choose to use, to simulate that whole, manual process of moving all that data to another.
Another script outside of this before you
It could be, it depends on how you want to do it. You could probably do it in the same script, or it may be easier to have two separate workflows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other questions? So the question is, are these PowerPoints available? All of us, all the presenters are responsible for making these available immediately after the conference. Give it 1 or 2 weeks, and they're going to be making them all available in PDF format. So yes, they will be available in PDF format with a little bit of a time lapse. Okay, about 1 to 2 weeks. If you absolutely want it, I can give you my card. And if you don't get it after the announcement, then I can make it available to you. Anyone else? Okay, so Jeff and I are hanging out in the showcase. So we'd love to talk to you, get your requirements, get your ideas. I'm either at the Pro Island, Jeff is at the Pro Island, or I'm at the Holistic Testing Island, which is within eyesight. So please come talk to us, and thank you for coming.